This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And folks, it is August 19th, 2021, and we are, well, pretty much mask free here in New Brunswick, and knock on wood, hoping to keep it that way. But folks, I have an indie filmmaker on the show with me right now, and somebody that I had just heard of as of last night. So I'll tell that story. Folks, I give you Richard Burgin. How do you do, Richard?
I'm doing very well, Greg. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Like Greg was just saying, like we didn't even know each other 24 hours ago, and now I'm already doing an interview on here. So this is like the fastest interview setup that I've ever had. This is wild.
Well, here's the story behind that. Uh, Lynn Laurie had posted the poster for your movie Fang on her Facebook page, and it looked quite intriguing. But she also did that earlier this year for The Witches of the Sand. And I didn't know who Tony Martin, the director of that film, was either. But I looked at The Witches of the Sand and I'm like, man, that's got a wicked cast lineup in it. So I reached out to Tony Martin. I had him on the show. So this is twice that Lynn Laurie has more or less without intention pitched a project to me with, with
Surprises.
yeah. Well, I met Lynn at Horrorama in Toronto in 2018. She's a lovely lady. She's a hugger. And I remember I got some pictures signed, and she was selling her Blu-ray for sugar cookies there, and I got that signed. And I remember I invited her for my podcast then, and she gave me her email and number right there. First time somebody gave me their number on the spot. I never did call her, but I have emailed her. But we never actually got an interview lined up until this year. You know, she's been in a lot of these projects. Scheduling is a thing, and I finally had her on in July, and and during the pandemic, she was doing some special things where she would sign Blu-rays and pictures and posters. And so I've got now I got Shivers, The Crazy, I Drink Your Blood, and a bunch of pictures and posters signed through Facebook by her. So yeah, so I became the first podcast Lynn had ever done. So
Oh wow.
yeah, yeah. So she was the one that more or less, and I talked to her last night, and she said very good things about you.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful to hear.
yeah,
I would have very good things to say about her too. She did a wonderful job acting in Fang, and I
yeah.
can talk about her character soon.
Well, we'll talk about her momentarily. I think what I want to start with is I want to get some of your background, how you come to get into this, because I know you've got a couple of short films, so this is your first feature, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Talk about your background, how you come to want to get into doing this.
Well, I think for me, really, and it's kind of funny because I actually have this article I've been writing about the making of Fang, and it starts with why I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Hmm.
And so I started by thinking about that question, and the answer I came to is I don't really know. It's just something that I just felt inside me that I have to do. It's just kind of, I think I said it's like this deep yearning feeling where it's almost like a compulsion, where I have to do this. And with Fang, I felt like, I have to make a movie. And I wanted this to be, like a really great movie. I didn't want to make like So I guess because anybody can make a movie really if you're just filming like with your iPhone, and you have your friends acting in
Hmm.
it. I didn't want Fang to be like that. I want this to be like I want this to be like a work of art. I want this movie to really, impact people who watch it, not like in a pretentious way. I just want it to be really kind of, memorable and powerful and everything. And so I wanted to figure out like how can I make a movie like that? How can I make a great movie with, the limited resources that I have? And so I started writing the screenplay for Fang in March 2019 in the halcyon days before COVID. And it
Hmm.
took me 5 months to write the script for Fang, which is really fast by my standards. That's like, the fastest I've ever written something. And part of why it went by pretty quickly is that a lot of it was inspired by my own life. The main character, Billy, he is very different from me in a number of ways, but there are also some similarities that I was able to draw from. And Lynn's character, she plays Billy's mother, Gina. And I would have to say her character was like a combination of my dad and his mother. And that may sound like very kind of innocent when I say it right now, but if you're talking about a combination of my dad and his mother, that's some pretty seriously neurotic shit
Hmm.
going on.
Well, I read the synopsis on IMDb, and almost got kind of a werewolf kind of um, plot to it, where somebody is bitten and they become something. Only in this case, it's a rat. You
That's right.
know,
He's
and
turning into a rat.
yeah, and you play the king rat according to IMDb. What made you
I have
want to
one
be?
scene. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have one scene in the movie where I'm acting because like the Rat King role is kind of hard to explain
Hmm.
out of context, but as Billy is turning into a rat, the Rat King kind of appears to Billy like in his visions and starts giving him this really kind of cryptic, I guess you could call it advice. Although most sane people wouldn't look at it as advice, but Billy does kind of start to look at it as advice. And I appear as the Rat King in one scene. The other scenes we had are one of our production member of our production team, Morgan Bass, wore the costume, but in one scene I'm wearing the Rat King costume, which is when Billy is asleep and he has a dream where the Rat King talks to him. And you can't see my face anywhere in the movie, but that's my Hitchcock moment where I appear under a rat mask.
I'm a big Alfred Hitchcock fan. I
Oh,
had
that's
his
cool.
I had his granddaughter on here back
Oh,
in
wow.
2016. Yeah. Um, yeah, that is interesting. How long did it take you under the makeup?
It didn't take that long, mainly because I like most of it was a mask, and then there was some like gray rat makeup that they put on my neck in the areas where the mask didn't cover, so it would look more like my skin was fur. I think it took about like 15 or 20 minutes for me to put on the makeup and then putting the mask over it. And then afterwards, I had to walk, home with some of the makeup still on. So I do wonder, when I was out on the streets of Chicago, like what people thought. They saw this guy walking by as like this, like kind of gray soot smudged all over his face.
I,
Yeah.
I've heard different stories. I mean, I interviewed comedian Dale Hilton, who had done a movie where he was gutted by zombies, and he went to one of those gas stations that have the washrooms, and showed up there, and people gave him some looks, you know.
Oh
So yeah, so yeah, you're not the first to have that experience.
yeah.
But how long did it take you to write? Because you went from a couple of short films, and here you got a feature. Talk about going from a short film to a feature film.
Well, the main difference is that, with a feature film, everything is a lot longer and more intense. So after making a short film, it takes a little bit more time to comprehend how much more work goes into everything, because
Hmm.
it's not just longer, because, like, let's say that, it's 100 minutes instead of 15 minutes. That means you have to do 8 times more of everything, 8 times more of a plot, 8 times more settings, 8 times more scenes in the script. And that magnitude, it may not, when you dream it up, like saying, yeah, I want to make a full length movie, it doesn't dawn on you, or at least it didn't dawn on me right away, how much longer it is. But I think at the same time, there's really not that much you can do in a short film. If I'm being completely honest, it's much more limited as far as, the time frame. And so you have to make a feature film to really get in depth with the characters, really get in depth with the concept, and really explore everything to the maximum potential.
So how long's Fang going to be?
It's going to be somewhere, I think the current edit is 97 minutes,
Okay.
and that may end up being like a minute or two shorter, or possibly longer, depending on the credits, the
Okay.
length of the credits, but it'll probably end up being a little bit shorter than that. We have like a little bit of blank space at the end of the current edit for where we put the credits in. So depending on how long that takes, I would say it's somewhere in the 90 to 100-minute range.
Okay. That's great.
Thank you.
Now, I never heard of this film until Lynn had posted on Facebook. Like I said, she's an unintentional promoter. I see what she does.
That's
And
great.
Lynn's a lovely person. So when I see something, especially when it's something interesting like The Witches of the Sand or even Fang, I mean, that poster with the rat face, just kind of jumped out at me, it was like, okay, what is this? What is she involved with here? Um, I like, how did you get the funding for this? Like, I was there an Indiegogo? Because I don't know anything about that. Um, Never heard of this project because there's a lot of the indie horror sites on Facebook. I've never heard of this. So, how did you go into making this film?
Well, it was self-funded, and I wrote the script intentionally so it could be done on as low a budget as possible, because I think if anything, lower budgets actually make you more creative while you're writing it.
True.
Yeah, because you have to think about like the limitations, and, like, so when I was writing Fang, I was thinking, how can I tell this story with as few settings as possible? How can I narrow it down, to just a few characters? And I was able to make it just cheap enough that I could afford to make it. It came very close to being too expensive, but it was just cheap enough. And I ended up getting the money from my dad because, well, prior to the making of Fang, he had been sick with Parkinson's for a long time, and that ended up being a big part of the script. It was art imitating life, because Billy's mother Gina is also suffering from Parkinson's, so that becomes the major dramatic theme in the movie.
Hmm.
And so, because my dad's health had been declining for a long time. He promised me like, and he had also, his mental health was declining too. Like he was having hallucinations. He wasn't really in a good position to be making decisions about a lot of things.
Hmm.
So a few years before I wrote the script for Fang, he promised me to give me like an early inheritance, like, when I was ready, when I was old enough that I could get part of the money I would inherit from him before he died. And, I was really thrilled, because this is like, this is my ticket to making a feature film. And so it was just like, once I knew that I would have this opportunity, I was thinking, how can I make Fang work on this kind of a budget? And then when I went up to visit my dad, and I made my proposal to him for the money, and then at the last second he backed out, and he got very upset at me for asking for this money, even though it was his idea to give it to me in the first place. And so we had a big conflict over that, and then we were finally able to work out an agreement, and so that's how I got the funding for Fang.
Yeah. It's sad because
Yeah.
my mom has Parkinson's and
Oh,
my
I'm so
dad,
sorry.
yeah, my dad's got ALS. So my
Oh, wow.
younger brother, who's my tech guy, he is right now taking care of them. And so yeah, I understand what you dealt with there.
Well,
But you
thank
know
you.
what? You made a feature film. You went from short films to a feature film, and you got Lynn Laurie in this film. I mean, that's not no small feat. I mean, she worked with David Cronenberg and Shivers. She worked with George A. Romero and the Crazies. I
That's
mean,
right.
she's been she worked with Paul Schrader and Catwoman or Cat People, excuse me.
Yeah.
So she has been around. I love Lynn Laurie. How did you go about getting her in this project?
Well, and then this is maybe the most unbelievable part of making Fang, but she actually asked me for a role in it, not the other way around. What happened was I was on, Facebook, and I forget even what I said. Like I just made a random post somewhere, like saying, hey, I'm making a movie, or I just kind of mentioned it offhandedly. And then that evening, I logged back on, and and I saw that I had gotten a message from Lynn Lowry asking me if I had any roles for her in the movie I was making. And I was like, oh yeah, I do. I was not gonna let this opportunity go. And
What
so
a catch. What a catch.
and then like so right away I started, reworking the script, and like I kind of wrote the whole character of Gina, thinking that, this is a role that she could play really well. And in addition to having Parkinson's, like Gina used to be a beauty queen when she was younger. And so she was like doing like this modeling like back in like her teenage years and her 20s. And now she's in her 60s, and she's looking back on all of that like very much in denial about her current physical condition. So it's a very kind of like, and she grew up like in rural southern Indiana, so she's like this kind of very melodramatic southern belle, and like kind of like a Tennessee Williams kind of character, only maybe more unhinged. And so I thought, that was a role that Lynn would really do a great job in. And she told me, while we were making it, that, this was her favorite role that she's ever played. And that was a pretty amazing compliment to get. I was like, damn, thank you.
Have you seen any of her films prior?
I have,
Yeah.
yeah.
What have you seen? What are your thoughts?
Well, it was kind of funny because like, I watched Shivers after I had, already started, talking with Lynn online about the role, and it's kind of funny, when you're talking with somebody now and then you go back and watch this movie from the 70s where it's a very sexual role, and she gets, like she's seducing all of these guys in the
Hmm.
apartment building after they get the plague of, I think it was like an STD kind of
Hmm.
plague. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I always
Watch.
identify her with Shivers. I love Shivers. I
That
got
is a really cool
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. She was a stunning woman, and she still looks great. She's aged
Oh
very
yeah.
nicely. Yeah, yeah. I enjoyed meeting her at Horrorama 2018, and I hope to meet her again. You know, but I did I spotted this on her Facebook page, and I was like, I looked into it, and she messaged me last night because I sent her a message telling her that I was going to interview you, and she spoke kindly of you. Talk
That's
about
good.
working with her on this film.
Well, she flew up to Chicago from Atlanta. I think she was here for, I think it was either 10, 11, or 12 days. I could look up the exact calendar, but that would leave like a long dead space
No,
in
you
the
don't
middle
have
of
to
the
do
interview.
that.
So it was like 10 to 12 days. And we filmed in January and February, so it was cold here. Although in retrospect, that was really perfect timing because we filmed in January and February 2020. So it was like right before the pandemic restrictions started.
You're
We were
lucky.
incredibly lucky. Yeah.
Yep.
And so it was worth it being cold for that. And and so Lynn got here. Yeah, the first scene we filmed with her was one of the more intense scenes, and I don't want to give any
That's all right.
spoilers to what happened, but this is a very intense scene between her and Billy. And I hadn't really done any rehearsals with Lynn prior to that point because she has a very busy schedule. So I was thinking, we might need a little bit more time for her to get into character, but she got on there, she got on set, we started filming her, and she just nailed it right away. She was Gina. And I think we were all kind of stunned by like the ferocity of her acting here because she is basically the villain of the movie, although it's not like a traditional villain thing because she's also like the victim
Hmm.
too, but she is largely responsible for Billy's mental distress, the experience of living with her. And so, it's quite a feat, for I think she was 72 when she filmed this. So here is this 72-year-old woman, and she's scaring the shit out of everybody else on set, and that's a pretty incredible thing.
Oh yeah, I'm glad that she reached out to you, because not everybody would do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, and here's somebody else you might want to work with in the future, is Eileen Dietz, who played Pazuzu in The Exorcist.
Oh cool.
Yep, because I had cameoed in 9 James Balsamo movies, and I remember one of them. She reached out to me and asked if there's a part for her in my movie, and I said, "Well, it's James's movie, but I did connect them, and she is in it, and
That's good.
she's a lovely person too." Yeah, there's some people in the indie horror world that have such great report, and I don't know what you're up for next, but I mean, I recommend Eileen Dietz if you get a chance from The Exorcist. I hear Felissa Rose is a gem from Sleepaway Camp, and Sandy Johnson from the original Halloween, played Judith Myers, is a lovely soul.
That's cool.
Yep. And of course, you can always work with Lynn again. I mean, why not? You know,
That's
she's a
right.
lovely person. I'm very happy that you got to work with her, and I'm really happy that she reached out to you because, like I said, not everybody would do that. You know.
Oh yeah,
Yep. So I gotta look at some because I don't know anybody else in this film, but I am
that's
going to.
okay.
That's okay because we're gonna mention some names because you got Dylan LaRay as Billy. Now
Yeah.
I don't know who he is, but I see some pretty intense pictures of him. Talk about him.
Well, for Dylan's role, like originally, like when I was writing the script, I wanted to play Billy myself,
Mm-hmm.
and that was basically my ego talking because
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have any professional acting experience. But I figure, this character was influenced by my life in a lot of ways. Who could play him better than me? And so one night, when I told my producer Rob that, he was very strongly opposed to it. It's like you can't star in it and direct it at the same time. And then one night, I was just lying awake in bed. I was thinking, how the fuck am I going to do this? How can I play Billy and direct the movie at the same time? So I just went back online. I set up a new audition, and I was looking at all these candidates for Billy, and Dylan's audition really stood out to me.
Uh-huh.
What really stood out to me about Dylan's audition is that, and for the system I had, I set up an audition on backstage.com, and the actors all submitted audition videos where they read part of the script. And what Dylan did that was different was he didn't choose one of Billy's monologues to read. A lot of his audition was silent. He was acting out like the facial expressions, the movements, like the physicality of Billy's character. And so that really, I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but that really stood out to me because a lot of Billy's role is, quiet. There are a lot of scenes that he's in where there's no dialogue. And so Dylan really was able to convince me that he was Billy, and that's what I needed to see.
Well, going back to what you said before, um, I'm not saying you should have starred in it. But I mean, saying you can't act and direct, well, Woody Allen's made a career out of
Right.
acting and directing, you know?
That's
But
true.
here's what I'm going to say. Um, it's kind of nice to direct a film and sit back and not have so much because you're also the writer as well.
Yeah, writer, director, casting director,
Yeah.
executive producer, and I did part of the soundtrack.
Yeah,
And
you
I
don't
acted
want
in
to.
the Rat King.
I mean, you could go total Tommy Wiseau. But where you say you don't have acting experience, you know what? You did the right thing because you do play the Rat King. You cameo, you know?
Yeah.
So in a way, allowing the lead performance to be played by somebody else, you didn't take yourself totally out of it. Like I said, playing the Rat King, here's what you did. You did yourself a great service because let's just say you're not a good actor. No, no, I'm not
No, I know.
joking.
I know I'm
Let's
not.
just say
That's
you're not.
okay.
The less the part you have, the easier it is to deal with. I'm gonna give you an example. I said I cameo in 9 James Balsamo movies. I cameo. I don't star because if I starred, I'd make Tommy Wiseau look like Laurence Olivier, you know? So I can do a cameo because it's not as much meat on the plate, so to speak, not too
Oh
much to
yeah.
chew. So I'm able to do that and not take away or ruin the film. Not that you would have ruined the film, but you
Well, I
you
mean, I might have, but I think it's really important, as when you're making a movie that you have to put your own ego
Mm-hmm.
aside and just do what's best for the movie as a whole, and not just think about like what would mean more glory for me personally.
Yeah, but you're the Rat King.
Yeah.
I'd say you chose well. Like, you
Thank
know,
you.
you got your part in there. In fact, I would say when you do the credits at the end, where they put, or even at the beginning, where they put the cast, and they always put and so and so as such. I would put and Richard Burgin as the Rat King, or special appearance by Richard Burgin
There you
as the
go.
Rat King. I mean, that's pretty special. I mean,
Oh
come
yeah.
on. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I am in a very important scene in
there you
the
go.
movie. Yeah, and I think that, as like one of the most important lessons for any filmmaker to learn, I think, is that, it's really a team effort, and you have to be willing to listen to people, you have to be willing to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just assume, my way or the highway, because then your way might lead to a dead end, and somebody else might have a great idea of how to solve the problem. And honestly, part of the ego thing comes from insecurity too. Like there's always like the flip side of narcissism is always insecurity. Like narcissists want to, be the best at everything because they're afraid of what would happen if they're not the best at everything. So that kind of fuels that. So I think true confidence is realizing that you can't do everything and being willing to delegate tasks to people who know more than you do. And so you can do what's best for the whole movie and not just what would make you look the best.
Well, when you get Lynn Lowry saying the things about you that she did, I would say you're in the clear on that.
Thank
Always
you.
treat your cast and crew well, which I'm assuming you have.
I try my best.
Yep. So we do need to talk about Jess Paul, because I know that she's a female lead in this. Well, after Lynn Lowry, Jess Paul, of course, is a caregiver. Am I correct?
Yeah, yeah. Jess plays the role of Myra,
Mm-hmm.
and Myra comes to live with Billy and Gina after the hospital says that, Gina can't stay at home alone anymore. She
Mm-hmm.
needs 24/7 care. So the hospital sends Myra to live with her. And my favorite way to describe Myra is the lyrics from the Billy Joel song. She's an uptown girl living in a downtown world.
I
That,
love that song. I
that's Myra.
remember. I
Thank you.
remember when that song first came out. I'm 49 years old, so I was something like, I don't know, 11 or 12 when that
Oh,
song
wow.
came out. I remember when it hit MTV and all them. The music video, of course, Christy Brinkley in it, and what that is my favorite Billy Joel song, and he's done a lot of great
Oh,
songs. But
cool.
yeah.
That is
Um,
a great song.
yeah, and I think it's interesting that you use that kind of a background piece to describe that character.
Well, yeah, well, that's the first thing I think of because, with Myra, and like, she's coming into this family and, Gina is unemployed because, she has Parkinson's, so she can't really work at anything. Her husband, Sam, died when Billy was 6,
Hmm.
and Billy works as a janitor at a factory. And so this is a pretty hard scrabble family. Whereas Myra is coming into it, she has a college degree. She has she has this kind of background in psychology. She has all these self-help books
Hmm.
that she likes to read. And so she's coming into this very dysfunctional blue collar family with this uptown girl background. And Myra, her job is to help them. And, Billy gets a crush on her right away. And it doesn't really work out. between them because he most like through a combination of, well, she's more interested in him at first, but he progressively gets more insane, and that is generally a turnoff. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I would say there's some red flags there.
yeah, and so Myra, she tries to help them, and then it still becomes clear that she's kind of in over her head here, and that Billy and Gina's problems go beyond like what she really understands based on her background in life so far. And one of my favorite scenes in Fang is between Myra and Gina. And I got to give you the background on this scene. And so, like, my dad's mother, she was, I think, like, the best way to describe her would be like a severely neurotic narcissist. She was a very troubled woman. And every time my dad brought a new girlfriend home to meet his mother would basically like put them through this kind of psychological hazing ritual where she would just try to like, she would just talk about all of her accomplishments, like the time she met Franklin Roosevelt, and just try to like break down his girlfriend's self-esteem. And then finally, after things were already very awkward, his mother would force his girlfriends to do a height measuring contest with her. She would force them to stand head to head with her, and my dad would have to judge who was taller. And so that inspired the scene in Fang where Gina does the same thing to Myra. And it's a very, and Billy has to deliver the verdict that Myra is 3 inches shorter. So that kind of kills any chance of a relationship between them after being put through that kind of psychological insanity.
So your film, is it all shot?
Oh yeah, we filmed it all, and we filmed it in 23 days in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of 2020. Everything
Okay.
then has been post-production, which is a very long process, especially when you have a low budget. Then everything takes longer because, you know, with the really high budget movies that are made by major Hollywood studios, they have a lot of people working on it. So you don't like, you don't run into as many snags like with fixing the audio or, you know, fixing like the editing. Like everything just kind of moves faster when you have more money to throw at it. But we've been making great progress lately. I really think we're close to the end now, which I've been saying for about a year, but we really are much closer now. So that's definitely something to be excited about.
Talk about release. What are your plans for that?
Well, as soon as Fang is finished, I'm going to submit it to different film festivals, and
Mm-hmm.
then whichever festival is the best, I'm going to choose that as the site of our premiere. And then after that, I'm going to try to get a distribution deal. And so my hope is to have Fang play in theaters somewhere, although realistically, the vast majority of movies now never get a theatrical release. But that would be my ultimate goal, to get it to play like in, you know, different like theaters that show indie films that of course, you know, have it on DVD, Blu-ray, and streaming and everything. It would be really cool to get it on Netflix or Amazon Prime too, because then, you know, I do kind of have like this, like everybody who's like a director has these kind of like power fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of fantasize sometimes about, you know, somebody who's just like, you know, they're sitting at home, you know, they're trying to watch something on either Netflix or Prime, and they're you know, scrolling through all these movies, and it's like, oh, you know, I just saw Fang on here, you know, looks like it might be interesting, and then they watch it and they just get completely blown away by it. And so I kind of fantasize about something like that. And of course, going to my high school reunion and being like, oh, I just made this great movie that a lot of people love. What have you done, people who mistreated me?
Yeah, oh, I can relate to that. I was mistreated a lot growing up. Yeah. Um, well, you had Lynn Laurie in it, so that's a plus. That's a major thing when you get somebody
Oh,
like that
definitely.
saying,
Yeah.
you know, um, I mean, the Blair Witch Project didn't even have a big name in it. Whenever, of course, it did well nonetheless. I'm not taking away from what it did, but you struck gold by having Lynn Lowry reach out. So,
Oh, absolutely.
mhm.
Well, I always knew, just like on a pragmatic level, that it's much easier, to get a movie distributed
Mhm.
when there's like at least one well-known actor in the movie,
Mhm.
especially somebody who's well-known among the kind of audiences that would want to watch Fang. And so, a lot of people, who are fans of cult horror movies have heard of Lynn, and so, they'll be more likely to watch Fang, and hopefully distributors will be more likely to want to add Fang to their roster of new releases.
Mhm. Is it gonna be a Blu-ray release to this?
I sure hope so. I mean, I think we shot it in 6K, if I'm remembering
Mhm.
correctly, although usually 4K is the highest quality that gets released in people's homes. But it's pretty wild now that, like, filmmakers who have almost no budget are filming like on a higher image quality than like blockbusters 30 years ago.
Well, it's interesting too because I mentioned Lowry, and I like the fact that there are actors, and I've noticed this a lot. There are actors out there that are available for this, like your Eric Roberts, your Eileen Dietz, Felissa Rose, Sandy Johnson, Genevieve Rossi is another good one. I'm hoping that when you do your next project, uh, that you continue, to reach out and get some, because that certainly adds to your film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of which, what is next on the plate for you?
Well, I've been working on this screenplay for a long time, and it's one of those things where, when you're writing, like, I always, when I have like an impending due date, that gets top priority. So
Hmm.
I never get quite as much time to write as I would like. But I've been working on this script for a while, and it's almost finished now. The title is Broken Angels, and it's kind of a crime story. And it's kind of like an inverted mystery, in a sense. The premise is that it's about this guy, and he's like a politician, and he's
Hmm.
campaigning to be elected senator of Florida. And he's like this very kind of like suave, charismatic, smooth talking guy. He's very good at, like, he can manipulate people and they don't even realize that they're being manipulated. He just makes it seem so natural. But he has a double life where he is like this very kind of dangerous, perverted, deviant psychopath. And so, like, the main characters progressively discover more and more of the crimes that he is committing.
It kind of
They have to
reminds me
get
of American
stopped.
Psycho.
It is a little bit like that, yeah.
Yeah. You have any ideas of who you want to cast in this film?
I do have some actors I've been considering. It's always one of those things where I think a lot of it, will depend on the success of Fang, like what kind of budget I can get
Hmm.
for this. Like, if Fang really grabs like a lot of attention when it comes out, that I want to shoot for like a higher budget, for Broken Angels. And if Fang is only moderately successful, that it's also will be doable on a lower budget too. Like I try to make it more, flexible. So there's not like a lot of really elaborate action scenes. It's more kind of psychological, as you can see, kind of how this guy, like a lot of the best scenes are just seeing like how this guy operates and, doing it in such a casual way, just kind of tearing down any defense that people would have against him. And at the same time, it's completely absurd when you know how guilty he is, but because it's so hard to prove it because he has all the angles covered. And so that's where the drama and suspense comes in.
Well, you have Lynn Lowry back for this one.
Well, there might be a role for her in it. We'll see.
I noticed going back to Fang. I saw the pictures on IMDb, which are very enticing. How many locations did you use for this film?
Well, our primary location had to be changed midway through, which was Billy's house. And another smart decision we made was that first we filmed all the scenes in Billy's bedroom before we filmed anything else. And in the house we were filming in then, I mean, this house was falling apart, There was no central heating system. And this was in January in Chicago. So we had to wear coats like indoors. And we had like these little space heaters running, but we couldn't run the space heaters while we were actually filming because they made too much noise. And so we had to keep going back and forth between heat and no heat. And then one day, because of the electrical problems in this house, the TV in the living room caught on fire. And I really wish I had been there to see that. That happened early in the morning before I even got to set. And so there was just smoke coming out of the TV. And then we realized that, the electrical power in this house is just fucked. We're not going to be able to film here. And so we switched to a different house after that. But thankfully, we had already filmed all of the scenes in Billy's bedroom. And so we just edited it together. So the scenes in the different other parts of the house would look like it was in the same house as the bedroom. And the other major location we filmed in was the factory where Billy works. He works for this guy named Mr. Wolfson, and Wolfson is kind of like an eccentric boss. Like he's the closest thing Billy has to a father figure, which is unfortunate because Wolfson is also involved in the mafia. He's like doing money laundering at the factory at the factory he owns. And he gives all of like these inspirational speeches about how they make the best meat processing equipment in the history of Chicago. And so for the filming location that we used for the factory was actually a haunted house. We filmed in the warehouse outside Hell's Gate and Haunted House, which is a great haunted house in Lockport, Illinois. And I'm going to go back there this year so I could see it like decorated, and fully operational for the Halloween season. And so we filmed that there. And that was also, it was somewhat cold in there because it's hard to heat a big warehouse in the winter, especially when it's mostly not used that time of year. But it was just so cool, to get to film in a haunted house. And I got to walk through like all the rooms where they would have people jumping out at you, in October. And I got kind of the behind the scenes tour there, and that was really cool. And actually, when we were filming there, Dylan actually slept overnight because Lockport is a little ways outside Chicago. So we figured, like, you know what, I don't want to have to travel home and then go back here in the morning. That's a long trip. I'll just stay overnight
Hmm.
here. So we got to stay overnight in a haunted house as part of filming. And I really wish I had known in advance that we would get to film in a haunted house, because I would, like, I would capitalize the hell out of that shit. I would write it into the script like yesterday.
Yeah.
But by that point, our script was locked. So we just used the warehouse.
Yeah, I noticed with you got scenes like with actor Pete
Oh,
Berwick,
yeah.
excuse me, at a bar. Where did you film that?
Yeah. The bar scene,
Hmm.
that was really fun to film. And Pete Berwick plays Billy's coworker, Danny.
Hmm.
And Danny is this guy, like, he is completely obsessed with sex, and he will make up like all of these stories that are just ridiculous, and tell them, in a very, like, oh yeah, I fucked her, kind of way. And so he invites Billy out to drink,
Hmm.
and we filmed at a bar called Bernice's Tavern, which is in Bridgeport on the south side of Chicago.
Hmm.
And this is just like, your kind of your neighborhood bar. It was a great location. And this is also the first scene where we get to meet the Rat King. He's also at the bar. it was a very it was a very fun scene to film. And for the hospital scenes, we just filmed in the basement of the second house.
Yo, that was what I was going to ask next. The hospital scenes.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
well, it wasn't a real hospital. It was just we just, like, we filmed at an angle so you couldn't see the basement behind it. We just dressed it up to look like a doctor's office. Like, we got a cot in there. We got some like white, you know, curtains and everything, and like an IV, and we had our hospital. And then the other location, we filmed outdoors, just for some walking around scenes. And the other location was the hardware store, which we
Okay.
filmed at Alvarez Hardware in Pilsen. And that was a nice, local neighborhood hardware store. I remember that was one day where it got really warm. It got up to 50 degrees, like in February. So that was like, hooray, it's actually fun to walk outside while we're setting up the shot. And so that was the scene where Billy has to buy some tools that he wants to use in the finale of Fang, which I don't want to say what
That's
happens,
all
but
right.
Billy wants to buy some tools. And in the hardware, and we were filming at Alvarez Hardware, which was, a Mexican American owned business, but the actor we had already cast was white, because we didn't know that this would be our location until shortly before we were filming there. So we made up a story that he was adopted, and he was adopted by the family that runs Alvarez Hardware at a young age.
What was it like working with Pete Berwick, excuse me.
Well, he got the role of Danny right away. Like when he auditioned for it, I was like, you know what? There's not even really much I can say. Like, and he, like, when he emailed me, he was like, you have to let me play Danny. I am this guy. And my main acting direction was just be yourself, and you'll be the perfect Danny. That's what I said to him. It was like the actor that I had to direct the least.
Well, I see him in that picture, the bar scene, and it looks like it's very well lit and whatnot.
Thank you.
So, but yep, yep. Well, do you have any charities or a web page that you want to plug or promote on here?
Well, I'm going to be setting up my own website, hopefully in the very near future. That's something else that's kind of been on the back burner for a little while, but it will be richardburgin.com when it gets set
Mhm.
up. And, several people, after I released the new Fang poster yesterday, several people expressed an interest in buying a print of the poster. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try to capitalize
That is a pretty
on
cool
this.
poster with
Oh,
the
thank you.
rat. The rat looks kind of cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. And when you get your next project up and going, like maybe next year around this time, I'll have you on again, and
Oh,
we
that'll be
can,
fun.
yeah, like I said, I never knew who you were until this. I didn't know I was going to be interviewing you today until last night, and just Lynn Laurie. It just came in my feed, that I got that Facebook notification. Lynn Laurie posted a post on Facebook, and I clicked, and there was this. So I was like, the poster just jumped out. So I was like, okay,
That's great.
this is the second time Lynn has done that unintentionally. Although I think she's quite happy to some promotion to her film with her. All she did was post it on Facebook, so she's promoting anyway. But I noticed this. So yeah, what I am going to do with you is I'm going to forward you to some other podcasters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Um, Scotty McCoy, who does Slasher Scotty. You'll like him. He's somebody I'm very certain would have you on. And maybe Rob Mahoney, who does one Father Mahoney's House of Horrors. So I'm going to extend your info, your Facebook info, to them, and have them
Oh,
get in touch with you, and allow you an opportunity to get your film out there even more.
well, that sounds great. Thank you so much. I'm glad I got to make such a great first impression. And, 24 hours ago, we didn't know who each of us were. And now I like to think we know each other pretty well. So that's great.
Well, we love Lynn Lowry. We absolutely love her. And I met her, and you worked with her, and we both know what a charm and lovely soul that woman is. So this is really because she had posted it. So there you go.
That's
Um,
great. You
I
never
would,
know what sharing something is going to do. Like with social media, it's always like you see these things that go viral, and it's like, why the hell did that go viral? Like I
mhm.
don't get it. But then, like occasionally, you can get a little bit of that magic working in your favor, and that's always a great feeling. When your own work gets to go to a new audience. And
Mhm.
I'm always very happy to talk to people about it. I'm always happy to tell more people my story and the story of the making of Fang, and tell people really anything they would want to know about it.
Well, you know what? I'll put you on next year's roster for interviews, and we'll see what you're doing then. And
Sounds
yeah,
good.
I'd be happy to have you back. Lynn Lowry spoke very highly of you. So if you get a chance to work with her again, I say take it. And like I said, I just gave you a list of other names you might want to consider as well. People that are very, very like-minded, and have very good reputations in the
That sounds
industry.
great.
Yes, absolutely. Anything else you want to plug and promote before we close off?
Well, I hope everybody, who's listening to this podcast gets a chance to watch Fang, and I hope you have a fantastic time watching it.
Well do, well do. Well, Richard, it was a pleasure to have you on here today, and I wish you best of luck on Fang, and hopefully it'll be successful and allow you to take your next project to even greater heights.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and I wish you the same. I hope you get to make some more appearances in different movies, get some good roles, and I hope a lot of people, listen to your podcast too.
Well, you know what? The less of me on screen in a movie, the probably the better.
I
But
know that's
I
honest.
yeah, but you know, I don't mind making a cameo. You know, I can make less a fool of myself that way. But I do enjoy this, and I love doing the conventions and doing my show here. So it was a pleasure. Is
Thank you.
you were a great discovery, and I was delighted to hear your story today.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was a pleasure talking to you too, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have fun at work and you have a lot more fun interviews on the roster too.
Well, I've got Nancy McLaughlin from Jason Lives lined up tonight, unless she has to reschedule. She had to reschedule once, but it's her fourth time on the show. She's an absolute delight. She's somebody you might want to reach out
Oh,
to at some
cool.
point too. Yeah, she's a real charm. So yeah, there's some really good people out there, you know. So yeah, they'll work with you.
That sounds great. Well, thanks again, and I
Hmm.
hope you have a great rest of your day and you have some fun this weekend.
Absolutely. You take care and God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
All right, you take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.